Let's start with some history of how all this began in Colorado. I have only been in my role for 2 years, and I've actually only been in wildfire mitigation for about 4 or 5 now, and I was a high school teacher before that. So all this happened without me, but I understand it and can explain it to you. Um, Wildfire Adapted Partnership, which was located in the southwest corner of our state and where Charlie shared that he previously worked with, they started engaging neighborhoods alongside NFPA. So that would be like the Firewise program that we know of now, but NFPA as an entity was involved. And that sort of began because there was a Missionary Ridge fire that burned 63 homes near Durango. And NFPA decided to hold a workshop there in 2002 to kind of talk to those residents and think about what they could be doing before the next fire, if you will. That was also a historic event in the sense like that was the beginning of Firewise USA, which you may already be familiar with. But it was also the beginning a year later of what we now know as the Neighborhood Ambassador Program. So Firewise and Neighborhood Ambassador have been alongside each other since the beginning. They've been collaborative since the beginning. They're not in antithesis or against each other. And that's really important to understand. We're not trying to rewrite anything or replace anything. Sorry, the picture on this slide, that's from the Weber fire. So the Weber fire occurred 10 years after Firewise and Ambassador program got started in this region. And the Weber fire impacted one of the communities that had engaged in the Neighborhood Ambassador program from the beginning. So the current FACO executive director, that's my boss, Rebecca Samuelski, she was the regional coordinator, similar to what Charlie did. And she was coordinating for this neighborhood and other high-risk neighborhoods in the county. And the residents that she was working with, they had been doing projects preparing for this next fire for nearly a decade. The residents spearheaded efforts such as writing a neighborhood CWPP, Community Wildfire Protection Plan, having a wildfire mitigation committee with a formal succession plan for the leaders, having community work days 4 times a year, followed by a potluck. And as a neighborhood, they actually purchased mitigation equipment such as the air curtain burner, the dump trucks, the chainsaws, and the associated personal protective equipment or PPE that would go with that work. 2 ambassadors from that neighborhood actually went on to win national wildfire mitigation awards. So there was a lot of action. The regional partners in that area, so the fire district, the U.S. Forest Service, BLM, State Forest Service, the local wildfire council, who these residents had been planning with and working on these projects with, were actually the same people that when this fire came were the ones responding to the fire. So they deeply knew the efforts and they deeply knew where mitigation had occurred in this neighborhood. The work that the residents had spearheaded definitely changed the outcomes of that fire. There's actually a video that they've produced that we use as part of our training program, and I'll put that in the chat if you want to, listen to the music and watch the fun video. And it is definitely an inspiring story of how, as a community, we actually came together and did this. It's not just the residents, it's not just the agencies. It's a clear model of success. Residents take responsibility for living in the fire-prone ecosystems, and then Wildfire Adapted Partnership decided, because this was an important lesson for everyone to learn, they joined Fire Adapted Communities Network to share all those lessons and propagate, their model. And from there, Wildfire Adapted Partnership sort of started working with FACO so that we could increase pace and scale for getting this work to the ground in Colorado. So that's where we came in. I wanted to start with just some vocab. Some of you guys might have this down, but it's really important. And even in my own state, I always have to rerun this vocab. So there's this word ambassador you hear me using, and then there's this word coordinator. And we just are working on this graphic right now. I see that the text could be a little bigger, but that sort of shows you a little bit of the structure of what those words mean. So the ambassador, this word, that's your resident leader who's leading the wildfire mitigation efforts in their neighborhood. So I said I go out and be an ambassador. That's for Valley High neighborhood, organizing things, moving people to action, encouraging education, offering to lend a hand physically as needed. That's your resident leader. Now, a coordinator is really different. The coordinator is usually a professional. I'll talk about that more in a minute, usually a paid position, and they're going to coordinate those resident leaders in a region. So they are making sure that they're meeting regularly. They're making sure that they have access to funding or trainings as they arise. They usually will be a liaison with the experts, so they can be going to the professional meetings and bringing that information back to the community so that all the residents don't have to bear that burden, honestly. That's a lot of meetings and a lot of information to stay apprised of. And then they also, encourage collaboration and capacity building. So these neighborhoods aren't building programs all by themselves. We can have programs that serve many neighborhoods. And I put on here on the slide, I really feel this a good coordinator also advocates for these residents and says, thank you for leading this stuff. We need you. We need you as leaders. There's room at the table for you. And it's also going to support the resident leaders and efforts. So if they want to do something, you're gonna try and make that easier, or you're going to connect them to what they need so that they can be successful, right? Because there are a lot of barriers. I'm a resident doing mitigation. I'm an ambassador doing mitigation. There are a lot of barriers out there. More in some communities, different ones in other communities, right? But having this partner that knows the mitigation landscape, it's really valuable. And so the coordinator is an essential part of the ambassador program. And you can see in our little graphic, with ambassadors, they're training their neighbors and residents. The coordinator doesn't really need to take that on. They can offer trainings, right? But that's too much capacity. And then FACO, really, we see our role as supporting the coordinators, not supporting everybody. We do some stuff to support ambassadors, but we always try to direct them back to their coordinator after we're done training them or after we're done providing them some funding. Like, the coordinator is your go-to, and we're really here to support coordinators. So that's why that graphic is a little bit helpful. Here's a map that now is probably 8 months out of date. We have a few more regions that have launched. These are our coordinators. So where there are active ambassador programs in Colorado. I meant to look up the number and then I got distracted with something right before this call, but blue is where programs are launched. Yellow is where somebody has attended a training, but they haven't launched yet. They don't have enough capacity. And then maybe there's like 2 or 3 more blue regions that have come on since I made this. And so what that means is that a coordinator or a coordinated region, it can look really different. We would feel that, like, the end goal is to have a staff position that is designated to 50% of the coordinator role, or more, make it a full-time, whatever, that'll be even better. Otherwise, you kind of get stuck in this weird space where you don't have enough capacity invested in the program that it actually starts to mine the capacity back, which is a big reason people want ambassador programs. They want, that momentum of ambassadors leading the work and actually mining capacity. So that does not mean at all that you can't get started with less capacity, with low capacity, but you have to think with the end in mind. That's one of our best practices in Colorado. So you need to think, okay, we need to get this to 50% in how many years that your organization wants to do that. In Colorado, our coordinators are incredibly diverse. We have people that are volunteer coordinators. So they literally don't get paid and they coordinate for the region because they're just that passionate about this work. They're usually people that are retired and had a career, in some kind of organizing, position where they have some skills they're bringing into the role. We also have people that are just hired half-time. So they found a cool ambassador in the community and they said, hey, do you want to work 20 hours as this coordinator role for 2 years to kind of get us started? We see that happen. We see people that are, full-time, their job is something else, like the mitigation specialist. So they start offering about 10% of their time, and then they slowly grow from there until they can hire the next staff member or they can actually grow their time to that. So it can look really different. Our motto is local is king. So the local region will know what's the best way to progress their program. And then what is FACO's role? Our goal is to provide reduce barriers to those regional coordinators that are trying to implement a neighborhood ambassador program. Pretty simple. Part of us being successful with that goal is knowing what barriers exist, which are really different in each region, and continuing to build relationships with the coordinators in this program so that we can be in tune with what they need and where they're getting stuck. This list got a little long, but in short, we do offer capacity support. So 3 years ago, our coordinators informed more support was needed to find funding to launch these efforts, to just get them started, kickstarted. And FACO responded by awarding a round of opportunity funding that was specifically earmarked to launch the regional ambassador programs. We also regularly have provided navigator services, so that helps the regions access grants. We advise how to access, state and federal grants. And then we also now have like a little Ember grant program where through NFPA funding, we can give up to $600 directly to neighborhoods and manage that so they can reach outcomes for the Wildfire Preparedness Month in May. So that's only been in the last 2 years, but it's really fun because then we get to see really awesome work. It's amazing how far $500 can go. That's all I'm going to say. Like when you pair that with volunteers and you pair that with momentum and enthusiasm, you will be amazed what they do with $500. We'll have a blog post coming out soon if you want to just like look at something really happy. 2 years ago, then our coordinator community informed us another barrier is that they don't have time or capacity to train all these ambassadors they're recruiting. They can do like a general orientation for 1 to 2 hours, but they wish that there was a vetted ambassador training course that ambassadors could attend, and then they could just send them there, and then they would come back and they would have a little bit more context for what they were doing. So FACO responded to that by contracting with Lisa and Andre, who already had this training program that they were just doing down by Monument, Colorado, just really locally. So we contracted with them and a liaison from Colorado State Forest Service and NFPA to help us build curriculum. And then we now offer that as a formal training alongside one-on-one support for, I think it's about a 6-week period of time to train these coordinators, and then we hand them back to coordinators. Coordinators can also download our PowerPoints and put them on locally. We don't care. We'll train them, you train them, the resources exist. And there's some other trainings on this list that we do. I listed a ton of them, and we push those out to coordinators in case they want to enroll residents. They're a little less resident focused, but some residents are a great fit for them. And then this is just, picture speaks 1,000 words. These were the Ember grants from last year. We have new stuff coming in this year. Some of the stuff was done. It's not just shipping, right? These guys are creative, and the way we teach them is to look at the full picture. They're doing fuels reduction in the first 5 feet. They're doing education and outreach. United Policyholders is our insurance liaison in Colorado, so they're learning about how, to navigate insurance. They are doing the actual fuel removal. We had a lot of pine needle projects this year. We had a lot of chipping projects last year, egress and address signs. So just some nice photos from the Ember grant. And then I'll just close with telling you what's next for Colorado, just to inspire, where things could go. So we teach this live virtual course. It takes 6 weeks. It's a ton of work for me and the 2 other people we've contracted with, and it's a little expensive, honestly, to keep putting it on. So we're now going to move into a self-led virtual course. If you've ever taken an online virtual course where they can start it at any time in the year, and they'll watch a video, they'll answer some discussion questions and do an activity, and they'll self-advance through it. One of the biggest pieces of feedback is it's too fast, it's too slow, or work got too busy, right? So if it's self-led and we have a longer period of time, they're going to be able to manage their own schedules, and we don't, it's a barrier that we're trying to remove, right? We'll still offer our live version every spring, and we'll still follow that, hopefully, with being able to offer the Ember grants and have that spring momentum. But the rest of the year, I'm not teaching live. The enrollments has been wonky too. Like, if people are even available in other parts of the year, people like it live in the spring. So we saw that. We have a new course, Wildfire Mitigation for Realtors, that we're working with the Division of Real Estate to teach. We have 4 locations in the next year that we're going to teach this. There will be a virtual option as well. So if Montana gets interested in that topic, I think Blake mentioned that maybe on another call, those resources are available to you. Sharing is caring, I hear. And let's get that over to you. We're redesigning our Neighborhood Ambassador webpage right now to make it more accessible and clearer and better graphics. I was inspired by Fire Adapted Washington, or WAFAC, with their really good page, and I said, oh, we got to keep up with them. So we're working on that over the next few months. And then hopefully we'll be teaching, maybe not me, but somebody might be teaching an ambassador approach. So that's the training for coordinators in Montana in the near future. And that would be really cool to kind of jumpstart your program. Contact information, there's me. And then the Wildfire Adapted Partnership, I mentioned that this whole program started there, and they have a really strong model, and that's also where Charlie came from. So that's your contact for the Wildfire Adapted Partnership and what they do in terms of their structure. And then on our website, as it's slowly getting better, you can read more about us. All right, thank you so much.